Hi, my name is CEO Moon, editor of Subtle, subtlenews.com. I'm here today with Greg Toews, President and CEO of Astara. So today's session is Clairvoyance, Why the Fuss? And it's a Q&A session as part of the Subtle Energy Conference 2024. And so let's dive in. Greg, my first question for you is, what exactly is clairvoyance?
Yeah, clairvoyance is sight beyond the senses. We spend so much of our time in normal everyday life processing information from our five senses. And clairvoyance is starting to tap into intuition, and you're going beyond the senses. And, when we look at the idea of consciousness, a lot of times we think consciousness is something that's in our brain, but it's outside of our brain. So outside of our mind. And clairvoyance is the ability to start tapping into that state of consciousness that we would refer to as like a higher consciousness, or starting to see with the eyes of light, you could say.
Would you say that, so when you're speaking about the senses, you mean the physical senses, the ability
Yeah,
to see, smell, and touch. And
exactly.
so when you're speaking about a higher sense, maybe I guess a spiritual sense, do you mean our spiritual senses in a way? Would that be in relation
Um,
to?
yeah, like when we start to tap into more of what is the aspect of what we would call the soul, something that's beyond the body, there is qualities or properties that go along with that. And as we start to tap into that, it starts to affect our mind, it starts to affect our emotions, and it will have a big impact on our physiology. Yeah.
Would you also say clairvoyance is connected in some way to the chakras? So for viewers, another word would be subtle energy centers.
It can be a reflection in the centers. Each of the chakras, which are energetic pumping stations that have very specific like functions, physically, psychologically, and spiritually. And when you start to tap into that higher state of consciousness, you're starting to cultivate the spiritual aspects within the chakras. Like I would say, for example, the heart. The heart is what we would be like associated with love or mercy, loving kindness of that area. But if you walk around in the world these days, there's not a lot of love going around, right? So they all have heart chakras, but they might not be cultivating the higher aspect in the heart center. And so when you tap into this higher state of consciousness, you start to bring into the mind and then eventually into the body these aspects that are reflected in the chakras. And so you could say that clairvoyance, everybody wants to ease their suffering or end their suffering. And everybody has a sense that something's out there. And you could say there's a kind of love that we can tap into that it's beyond right or wrong. It's beyond good or evil. It's something much greater. And I think we all have a sense of it. We couldn't put words to it. But clairvoyance is the beginning to tap it into the light and the love that would manifest in the body and the energy body as these higher virtues.
So that's interesting because it sounds like clairvoyance is more than what I think a lot of people would assume. It's just the ability to see things like colors or energy bodies or
Right.
things in the subtle energy realm. So would you be able to describe what that more might be?
Yeah, you're beginning to experience basically your higher nature, your true nature. We live a life where there's a lot of water under the bridge. Things happen to us, good things, bad things. People get upset at us. We make good decisions, we make bad decisions. And based on all of this, we start to have a kind of conditioning that affects our perception. With clairvoyance, you're kind of going beyond that and you're bringing something in that actually begins to displace those experiences. And as you begin to experience your higher nature, it kind of puts all those things into perspective. A lot of times when people are wanting clairvoyance, the part of the mind, the intellect that is tied to the senses and how we process that sensory information. It works for going to the store and balancing your checkbook and, driving your car. But at the same time, touching those things that really have some sort of deep value for a person in the inner self, intellect really can't touch. And I think a lot of times people begin to go down that path of clairvoyance, thinking that it's going to make that intellectual part of the mind a little smarter or a little like trick or thing that they can grab onto. Where really clairvoyance is stepping away from that everyday mind and looking from a very different perspective. And it doesn't mean that that everyday mind isn't valuable, but you even look at the idea of meditation. We focus on something, like people might focus on colors, they might focus on a chakra, they might focus on an image. And we all get caught up in what image and what color and what should I be focused on. And really it's more about being watchful than about what you're watching, because as you become more watchful, you become more observant, it really starts to be more about what's inside and not outside. And you could say, like, when you practice clairvoyance, you kind of come away with this idea of, I don't believe in believing, because a lot of times with believing, you go through, you process something, you believe something, and then like inquiry stops. You stop kind of processing it. You stop like letting it affect you. You kind of define it, you stick it up on the shelf, and you go, I got that, right? When you focus on an image, a sacred image, the love of your family, the love of a partner, just loving kindness in general, it's a thing that continues to expand, especially when you're in an intuitive state. And, we can't maintain it 24/7, but the more that we're able to go there, the more we'll be able to experience these higher aspects. The idea of enlightenment, a lot of times, I think, is also misunderstood. A lot of times, which clairvoyance is associated with enlightenment. And, people think enlightenment is to be like all knowing and all seeing in your environment, in the world, to know the things that are about to happen. And, yes, flashes like that might happen. They kind of do, but really enlightenment is more about knowing yourself. And so I would say clairvoyance is, it helps you function in the world, but at the same time, it helps you to realize more of your true nature and who you are on the inside. And when you have your feet under you in that way, the world kind of changes. Your perspective of the world changes. How you survive and move throughout the world. It all kind of shifts and changes.
So that's interesting, because what I was going to follow up with was, is everyone born with clairvoyance? But now my question would be, are they either born with it, or is it something they have to build up to, or maybe it depends?
I would say that there's a matter of degree. Like everybody has a potential. I would be a perfect example. I was not a very sensitive person. Like I did not see, I couldn't feel energy. And through the years of doing meditation and practicing, all of a sudden I became much more sensitive. And there came a time where I started even doing work in the corporate world as a clairvoyant, where people would, hire me to do things. And if you look at the idea of intuition, which is the stepping stone to clairvoyance, intuition is about learning, it's about innovating, it's about healing, it's about movement, it's about light. It's very different than the intellectual mind. The intellectual mind is very good when dealing with past experiences and things we've learned or memorized already, right? And it maintains that. Like it it has templates or parameters that it applies to the world, like do this and you won't get harmed. Don't touch a stove, you won't get burned. Stop at a stoplight and you won't get hit by another car. There's things that we learn, but when we're in a new situation, or when we're going through a difficulty, or when we have some pattern in our life that no matter how we change or how we shift, it's just still always there. There's something to be learned. And a lot of times we think of karma as like a punishment, but it's just cause and effect. And karma is really the soul learning through our physical experiences. And a lot of times the soul is trying to learn or develop something as we go through these patterns. And you could say our patterns of suffering are really kind of either a lack of awareness or a resistance to learning something on a soul level while we're in the body. And so, as we go through and we look at all this, everybody has a potential for intuition. I mean, we do it, like how you go into a new situation and start to learn how to do things. You might be told, okay, do this, and this. But then you get in there and you start looking around and go, well, everybody's doing other things than what I've been told. So you begin to kind of like mimic what everybody is doing. And in that mimicking, you begin to have experiences that then you start to learn. And then your intellectual mind goes, I got this. But the first step was that intuitive process, the observation, the watchfulness. And so the idea of meditation or intuition or clairvoyance is to develop a kind of watchfulness so that you learn more about yourself, and you also learn more about the world around you and the people around you. As you begin to realize your true nature, you start to realize the nature of others and the nature of situations. So you begin to avoid situations that might be harmful or not good for you. You might avoid that person who told you who they were right off the bat, but you were like, nah, but we both like the same thing, or whatever it is. And 6 months later they do something that's incredibly hurtful or devastating to you. It's learning to listen with magic ears, and see with magic eyes, and feel with those magic senses. I say magic just because it's beyond intellect. It's not really magic, it's just different. And so in alchemy, you see pictures of sometimes a man with two faces. And, if you don't know what you're looking at, it seems like a very odd picture. It sounds like something out of Batman or something, where it's some villain, but really it's the face of intellect and the face of intuition. And for most people, those two things are very much at odds. And so the cultivation of clairvoyance is bringing harmony to those two parts of your mind. And as you start to bring harmony to those two parts of your mind, you begin to experience more of your true nature.
That's interesting, because it sounds like there's a buildup or a process or something that the more as you, I guess, work on yourself, or you connect more with your spiritual identity, for lack of better words, you start to grow and evolve in this. But there were so many people, many of whom I've spoken to within my own group of friends, that are really interested in this idea of clairvoyance and having this ability, almost like it's a superpower, as quickly as possible. So I'm wondering if you can speak to this.
I'll try. I think it goes back to, like, we all kind of want to have that special secret, or that special ability to end our suffering, or be able to foretell like the difficulties in life. Part of the issue is sometimes I think we look at obstacles from the point of view of intellect in an odd way. I'm the worst at it. Like, my early form of meditation was meditation on obstacles. It's too difficult, it's too big, there's no way I could deal with it. Like, those were my mantras of my youth. And from the point of view of intellect, that's true. And when we have that point of view from intellect, we'd like to be able to not have to deal with those obstacles. We'd like to be able to sidestep those obstacles or just bypass those obstacles or even work through those obstacles. But when you look at it from the point of view of intuition and then clairvoyance, obstacles are how we learn. Obstacles are how we grow. Obstacles are how we evolve. And so you think of the idea of, in the Hindu tradition, Lord Ganesha, who is a deity that's symbolized as a being with an elephant head. You know, that's the transmutation of our lower nature. You know, the elephant head being associated with the root chakra or the basic chakra, which is associated with the form. And that aspect is transmuted so that the elephant is now on the head, you know, on the higher faculties. And Ganesha is seen as the overcomer of obstacles, right? And so part of our growth, part of our evolutionary process, and part of the reason why we're in a body is to learn our lessons, to grow. Not because it's a punishment, but it's how the soul grows and evolves. It's how it accumulates more light and develops. And so I think, and I'm guilty of this. In the early days, I would love to sidestep all those obstacles. But as you start to look at the process of clairvoyance and intuition, it's really the problem solver. You know, intellect is a good maintainer, like it maintains the things going on in your life. But intuition is the problem solver. And a lot of times when we have difficulty problem solving, it's just because we haven't presented it to that part of the mind. That's all it is. It's not that a person's not smart or they're not intelligent or they're not capable. It's just like how you would set up an altar and look at the altar before you start meditating, or you set up your desk at work with all the things that you need there. You know, you're setting yourself up so that you can produce a result. And the idea with problem solving is intellect even being able to take in all that information and still presenting it to intuition so that these issues can be overcome or you process through them. And when I look at like the journey of my life, I would love to be able to say, you know, I came up with a good idea, I formed a strategy, I executed it, and it was amazing. I can't say that happened once, like not once. I would come up with an idea, I would come up with a strategy, I would execute it, it would go all wrong. And then I would have to sit and go, okay, what am I going to shift in myself? What am I going to bring forth to make this happen? Or do I walk away? And those times where I really dug deep and overcame whatever that difficulty was, that usually produced these really amazing things in my life. But it came from an obstacle. It didn't come from being super smart. You know what I mean? It just, the intelligence is in the overcoming of these issues. And I would say that even if people don't directly know that, there's a sense that people have about, like you said, a superpower or that ability to ease suffering or to work through things or be in a place where you evolve a little bit more rapidly, or just the quality of life changes. You put yourself in the right place at the right time. You know, I think we all kind of sense that on some level. But I remember when I was first being taught clairvoyance, you know, I remember saying to my teacher that, you know, he was saying, you know, how's your clairvoyance coming along? I was like, good. You know, I was really, you know, not very like amazing. I was just like, it's good. And he kind of looked at me like, you know, kind of a weird attitude. And the thing that I said is, you know, with the clairvoyance, it's good, but I sense that there's something beyond the clairvoyance. There's something much bigger than just seeing the things around me. And he was quiet and he said, "Who told you that?" And I go, "Nobody told me that. It's just a sense that I have." And he leaned into me and went, "Very good." And so, I was fortunate to have a couple of teachers at the time. And so I had that same discussion with the other teacher. And he said something very interesting. He said, the thing with clairvoyance is you really have to keep it in perspective because, at first you start to see all these images, you start to see things around you. And in a way, it's a little bit of a trap. And, you can get really fixated on that ability and that, that, that tendency to see and the things that you see. But going back to what I said to the first teacher, he said, you have to really kind of keep that in perspective because really the goal is something past that. There's something much deeper. And that ability to see is just a byproduct of where your perceptions are going, not that it's the perception itself.
So one of the questions I was going to follow up with this one is, what are some of the misconceptions and or dangers of pushing forward with clairvoyance, perhaps too quickly? But you've spoken to some of the potential dangers or pitfalls of this and some misconceptions. Is there anything else you'd like to add for viewers to be aware of?
Well, I would say, over the years, the biggest kind of misperception, I would say, for clairvoyance is people think that, especially when they start kind of practicing it a little bit or practicing the idea of it, because sometimes people are kind of practicing an impersonation of it, so to speak. You know what I mean? And they'll start to think that the things that arise in their mind are some sort of guidance. And when you really tap into something that's beyond your senses, there is a little bit of not being sure of what you're seeing. Like one of my rules of thumb is like, if something comes in and I'm really super sure of it, it's because there's something in my head or in my psyche that wanted something or is projecting something. But there's a little bit of uncertainty that happens when you really perceive something because it's not of the sensory mind, it's not of the intellect. And so when it comes in, you're kind of like, boy, what is that? And you really kind of have to sit with it for a little bit and let it sink in. And then eventually the intellectual mind does pick up on it. But you go through this little period of validation. And so I would say the slippery slope is, you have a thing arise in your head and you go, oh yeah, clairvoyantly I see that it's this and that I should go to the store and like have some ice cream for dinner. And, like whatever you wanted to do all of a sudden becomes clairvoyant observation to justify what you want to do. And so I would say that's the big slippery slope there. Yeah.
So it's basically falling into the trap that you may think it's something specific, or you just assume that it's something when you haven't taken the time to really sit and think about it.
Yeah, I would say it's like sometimes it becomes a justification for what you want to do, or it fixes something. It gives you some sort of justification of something going on in your world. Even if it's just like, this is why this person is doing this. I clairvoyantly observe they're just an obnoxious person and that's why they're being mean to me. Who knows? Like, that might be the case, but still, there's a lot of factors. And so, yeah.
Would you say that, I guess, studying certain esoteric spiritual teachers, like the books they come out with, for example, Astara has a lot of books from Erlin Cheney, Robert Cheney. So, for example, would you say that reviewing, studying, trying to understand these books, the content in these books would help with this aspect of, maybe understanding or having a greater awareness of what you may be seeing rather than sometimes falling prey to assuming it's something like going for ice cream for dinner.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very good point. And the thing that's nice about studying like spiritual information that's pretty accurate is it displaces like opinions and your past experiences, and it opens you up to new potentials, like the ability to embrace something that's outside of yourself. And so I think studying things like that is not the complete way, but it's a part. It does help you step outside of your box and out of your way of thinking and allow for new things and new ideas to come in. When we're stuck really in the intellectual mind, the mind can become very rigid. And we start trying to micromanage all our aches and pains from over the years, and we become this like micromanager of everything that kind of comes in. Even the idea of the heart, in Kabbalistic teachings, the heart is also associated with imagination. And that doesn't mean the ability to make something up, but the heart will perceive something before the mind can perceive it. And so it's imagination and Kabbalistic practices is the ability to perceive something beyond the mind. And as the heart sits and experiences it, the mind starts to have experiences and then can grab on to whatever that perception is and begin to process it. And so it's another way of displacing those old ways of thinking, because truth is dynamic. The intellect is not dynamic, but the intuition is, and the intellect gets better and smarter and more flexible the more that it interacts with intuition, not that it avoids intuition. So going back to your friends at the superpowers, it does make you smarter. It's just probably different than the way the average person would think. There's kind of different kinds of intelligences, and it's a deeper intelligence. It's more of like a intelligence about yourself, an intelligence that's beyond the mind even.
There's also this sense that purification, so I guess the working through some old emotions, things that are more on the negative side, need to forgive, like things that just kind of clutter in your body. And there's a sense that doing this type of purification, to what level, I'll let you speak to that, but can also help with clairvoyance to the extent that you described it. Can you speak to this as well?
Yeah. So the idea, like, you can focus on particular things, but I go back to the idea of that it's more about being watchful than about addressing specific things. Because as you become more watchful, you're training the mind to shift from the intellectual mind over to the observer, or the beginnings of intuition. And when you look at it from the point of view of meditation, for example, you calm the body down. And as you calm the body down, the seed for greater emotional awareness or a greater emotional experience is there. And then as the emotions calm down, there's the seed for greater mental activity is there. Like if you think about times where you got upset or somebody got upset at you, for maybe half a day or a day, it was very hard to put pen to paper or have clear thoughts without getting super distracted. And it's because the emotional body was so agitated. And as the mental body calms down, the seed for greater spiritual activity is there. And, at first, sitting still and putting your legs in a posture and holding yourself upright is that stillness that we try to achieve with the body. And then, the emotions get activated and then calm down, and then the mind, and then it calms down. And then you start to have your expansion into consciousness. And so the purifications, I would say, would be the biggest part would be calming down agitation in the body. is if you can calm down an agitated nervous system, and if you can calm down an agitated immune system, and even emotion. There's different kinds of emotion, and a lot of emotion is what you would call homeostatic emotion, which is emotion that is generated by the body to motivate you to take action in the environment to thrive. So even the idea of hunger or thirst is a homeostatic emotion. Shelter, it's a homeostatic emotion. Not being abandoned, to fit into the group, not be rejected, that's a homeostatic emotion. And the ability to calm those things down so that you can have greater activation of the heart, greater activation of the mind, and then a greater spiritual potential to experience that consciousness outside of your mind. As you experience it, you bring it back down into the mind, you bring it back down into the body. And the more that you bring that kind of consciousness into the mind, into the brain, it really calms the mind down. It really calms the brain down. It starts to calm down the physiology. And so going back and forth between meditation and purification can just simply be like different ways of calming the body down. Yoga with the physical exercises is another way of experiencing it. People using herbs and things like that is another way. Breathing exercises, just having moments of reflection. Or if you think about sometimes when you go to a top of a mountain or you sit on a beach and you watch the waves, and you feel like this is just amazing. You calm down your physiology a little bit, and you begin to have more reflection, and you moved inward a little bit more. It's just because things got calmed down. So even the idea of purification isn't that we're bad or naughty or we got to get rid of these things that, if you grew up in a church, like I did, there was a lot of things that were projected, and as you get older, it's just about kind of calming everything down so you can be yourself, getting rid of the shoulds and the should nots, and just really experiencing life like as a soul, or experiencing your higher consciousness in your normal everyday life. I mean, who you have that? Who could want anything else?
Well, I think that's a perfect way to end this session. So, Greg, thanks so much for taking the time to do this interview, this
Yeah,
Q&A, actually.
yeah,
Yep.
my pleasure.
And for the viewers that are watching this, I hope you take some time to follow some of Greg's advice and really be in that moment, be with yourself. And I hope you can take something with it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.